Hi there. Every Sunday, a group of autistic people get together and drop in. It's an informal group, but some of the things that people say deserve a bigger audience. So they give us permission for us to put them in an edited reel, and that's what we're here for. Today's edited reel of the conversations that we have about our own autism. Cheers, enjoy.
How are you, Jules? And GR and Robbie.
Yeah, thanks for that, Teresa. I'm good. I had to take my headphones off, put my Santa hat on, make sure that the seam of the Santa hat went across so that it wasn't visible, so that then I could, it's an autistic thing, but being an elf at this time of year, out and proud, I have to remind other elves out there that, solidarity.
I think you might be like the elf and the Santa. I think it was the first Home Alone. Do you remember them? They smoked, coughed.
I didn't do Home Alone. Sorry.
Just kidding. I get the idea of keeping your hat perfectly straight and whatnot.
The way I see it, almost all the other elves that I know have turned out to be neurodivergent. Amongst other elves, neurodivergence it's the same with pixies. Most pixies I know are neurodivergent. Most witches I know are neurodivergent. I'm a 60-year-old man, so I've actually worked with the big guy. I've had kids. I've been his proxy. I've worked with him. I've got form with Santa,
You ever noticed that when you receive a Gmail from me, the icon is Tinkerbell, which my parents nicknamed me as a very, very, very young child. And for those who don't know a lot about Tinkerbell, she has an extremely bad temper and she could use that wand for good or bad. Do you know what I mean? You have to really keep her under control. Well, I don't mean you should control her. I just mean you should understand her.
Yeah, J.M. Barrie wrote a strong woman role through the fairy icon of Tinkerbell in Peter Pan.
Yeah, I don't think people really knew a lot about neurodivergence then, obviously, because I'm similarly aged. So I'm going to guess I got that nickname around definitely by 1969. And then bringing it to elves and Santa and all of that, I could outwake anyone. But then when it got to the moment where I could go look to see who was putting the gifts out, I couldn't go. So only much later on, I knew that the footsteps and the things that I heard one year when I was 6, and they very effectively fooled me too, because I knew where my parents were in the house, but it was my grandparents.
Yeah, I had a pretty good experience as a kid because I woke up thinking that I had actually heard Santa come in. And I woke up thinking that I'd been awake and I'd experienced, because I had done that trying to keep awake past midnight to check on the whereabouts. But you never know with these things. It's a memory I remember accessing very early on in my life. So it's a memory that I've come back to a lot. It's not something I've found recently accessed, but it's a memory from a child of a night that's so exciting. I do remember a night when we went to bed and the next morning it was snow in Germany once when I was quite young, and that was absolutely magical. In the text, Robbie says, telling me to do something will make me want to do the opposite. And he also reminisces saying that his family stayed up until after midnight, and then they opened the presents on Christmas Eve night into Christmas Day morning, which I think is quite a cool thing to do because it gives the parents a lie-in the morning. Ray says, I don't think I've ever believed in Santa. Bah humbug, boo hiss, Ray. No, we shouldn't shame somebody for not believing. Okay, man, if you're a Santa agnostic, that's life. I don't think I've ever believed in Santa and all that. When I met a guy dressed up as him, I freaked out and was convinced he was my dad. I was pulling his beard off. Wow, Ray, that's an autistic child sorting this out. Yeah, I'm understanding now where you're coming from. Robbie, I think we were made to go to midnight mass at the Catholic Church Christ, do you not know whether you were or not, Robbie? Because I think the answer is probably you were made. I don't think there's a think about this. I think you've got that memory there.
I like the idea, Ray, that you were suspicious of Santa, those dressed up Santas. That makes loads of sense. And my son was like that too, and I really felt for him. I think the thing it made me feel in all practical terms was that why would you go to a man dressed up as Santa? Like, it seems so dangerous, really. It's a very good survival instinct to not go to people like that. In the comments, Robbie says he used to like advent calendars with chocolates that his grandmother's sister sent from Germany. That sounds wonderful.
Yeah, it looks like Robbie's like me. I lived in Germany when I was a child, about the same time that advent calendars that had previously been, pretty boring, run up to Christmas, Mary and Joseph picture of in the middle, little pictures along the way, nothing. And then after living in Germany, the advent calendars with a chocolate for each day, plus the little symbol of Christmas, made a big appearance. Now that's everywhere now, all over Europe. There was this time when it came in that it seemed really exotic.
Yeah. Even just generally about little chocolates, the ones when you went to someone's house who were from Germany, or to any delicatessen that was genuinely German, and I'm saying this as a Canadian with, on one side of my family, German connections. Their little chocolates, just the tiniest one, so much. It could be like wrapped in foil to make it look like a ladybug, or just the magic of the little things was excellent.
Here in Europe, we've got something called Mozart Ball, and it's a very ancient traditional company that have been doing it, making these truffles basically every year. Viennese, Mozart, obviously the association. And one Christmas, I took my small young family, my daughter and myself, over to Salzburg in Austria, because I'd been there before as a kid, rather on my uppers, selling things in the street. And this time I was staying in a fancy hotel, and I was taking my very young daughter to make sure that they got a Christmas that they could remember that was magically Christmas. And there was a Christmas market there, and there was guaranteed snow, and she was going on trams, and she saw Father Christmas in the street get onto a tram, give her a little wave, and then disappear. In the hotel, every morning, the staff put these little Mozart balls on her bed so that she had this little beautiful present from some other kind of universe. And it's these little lovely details that I think autistic people really can enjoy and take joy from.
My daughter's first job out of university was at this historic district. And remember, this is Canada, so nothing built is historic because the Indigenous people to Canada were often, but in this region where we live, which is Ontario, more nomadic. So they didn't leave like a lot of built culture. So it took a while for us to have a historic district, but it was being built out. And so she got a job as an admin assistant, but somehow got to be involved in the building out of a very well replicated German Christmas market that continues to this day, although they don't call it the Christmas market anymore, which has some people saying bah humbug. But I think that's all right because more people go to it.
Can I do a little audio test here?
It's perfect.
We on a Christmas theme. I was curious as to how autistic or neurodivergent people relate to the idea of spending, which is a big thing at this time of year. The relationship, say, with money. You know how some of us like a bargain or value for money or don't have enough money and in my case, kind of like have almost a resentment of it, like a fear of any large amounts of cash in transaction. I mean, I recently had an MOT and it cost a good few hundred, but I was kind of relaxed about it. But I have other things that I should be investing in. And see how I call it investing rather than spending. So a bed is not cheap. That can almost be $1,000, like £1,000. Household conversions are huge amounts of money, like a bathroom or a kitchen, because I've got really old things. And even like white goods. So I just wonder how people feel about spending, that economy, especially at Christmas time, and how it relates to autism.
One of the things that because there are so many of us who are neurodivergent, both of my adult children, we're pretty focused on traditions and experiences. And before I had grandchildren, sometimes we would keep the traditions that are like everybody gets a new pair of pajamas on Christmas Eve and they coordinate. They don't exactly match because that would be too much. And that year, like we would keep that one element because we determined that was and also it's practical. But we did either some years it was only experiences. So you would give a card that described the experience you would share with that person that year, like a museum day or something. And then another year we did things from some human rights organization had these opportunities where it would be a small amount of money for us, but it would result in a very big difference to somebody. And then we had to make sure that it wasn't going through a bad channel.
I'm just reading some of Robbie's responses in the chat. The latter one was, I don't spend for the sake of it. I don't save for the sake of it. So it sounds like not too hung up on money per se, but there's this thing of spending for the sake of it. The idea that people like shopping as an addiction, pleasure, as a pastime, as a mode of meaning for some people. I get very fearful in that whole scenario. It's alien to me somehow. And yet I have to participate sometimes. And when I do, I'm fraught because I don't trust myself. The sense of value, the sense of worth, and choice as well. Unlimited choice at times. It's just crazy. But what else is Robbie saying in the text? His bed was a lot of money and the removal men broke it. See? Big cash layouts and disappointment at the end of it. Horrible feeling. Robbie agrees with me that he hates getting ripped off. Yeah, and Christmas makes no difference to his spending of money, which may mean a reference to the level of participation we have in Christmas events. I put in that my doctor just recommended pyjama bottoms to me. Imagine your doctor recommending pyjama bottoms to you. It was after a personal examination as well, so there's a comedy sketch there, I think. I also put in, is spending, a form of access when I was listening to Teresa talking about events and, spending on experiences.
The only difference to my spending this time of year is I've gone to a pantomime with the brass group I go to, and I'm going to dinner with them, but other than that, no difference. And things I've bought recently are just things I would have bought at any time of year. And you look at the sales all the time. The moment one sales end, they start another one and they add things slowly. So you know full well that it's going to come round again most of the time. So they're just trying to make it look in short supply and you're getting a deal. Well, most of the time they probably jacked up the price in the first place to make it look like it's cheap.
Yeah, I popped into an electrical store around about the Black Friday weekend or whatever, or week or whatever it is now. And I just thought, man, this is a huge super spreader event. And what happens? There's suddenly a flu scare going around. And I thought, well, what do you expect if you start to get a lot of people into one place frantically trying to get stuff on the cheap? Now, it's almost like herding. And of course, that phrase came back again this week in the news, herd mentality. So it's just strange to connect those two things, in my mind at least.
Isn't that how all the diseases go around all the animals, with these bigger abattoirs and sort of mixing lots of animals from different places and the bigger markets? And
I think maybe, do you mean in foreign countries like in Asia, like the origins of COVID? Yeah, that idea. But over here in abattoirs, I don't know if we had a scare in the 90s, didn't we, with bovine encephalitis, wasn't it? The BSD, what was that called? Mad cow disease. Almost put me off eating bridies, which is a pasty, I think, down south. Yeah, I'll leave it at that.
I think mad cow disease started off in 10 Downing Street.
For
Robbie
real?
goes where I dare not go.
I'm just asking. Seriously?
I think
Well,
it's a satirical comment. The person who was in power at that time was Margaret Thatcher. So to call her a mad cow at the same time that the disease started to destroy our farming industry is the satire there.
That is super funny. And you know what? We don't use cow as an insult for women in Canada. However, I do have enough friends who are located here and were born there who effectively use that word just brilliantly.
Yeah, it can be used in all kinds of nuances. So you can call another person who is your best friend a silly cow, but you can't if you're a guy in that situation. There's lots of rules.
I think you can for a public figure, especially super effectively, the way Robbie said at 10 Downing Street. But then I didn't know that the era was the same for the two, so that was a very, very, very good use of it. But I just gonna stop in a second. I just want to say there's another C word often used for women that I never, ever in my life heard. But I do realize it's more funny over there. We don't I have never said the word out loud, but it's hilarious.
If you don't mind putting it in the private chat.
I'd make sure you have a lawyer present if you're going to use words like cow for public figures. My recall is that it was in the 90s that mad cow disease broke out, and I recall this guy, John Selwyn Gummer, who was like Home Office or something, and he was out there deliberately eating pies, saying, look, everything's okay, don't panic. So maybe it did originate in 10 Downing Street, because I think Major was in power at that point, and he was a mystery.
Selwyn Gummer famously fed his children beef burgers from British beef origin in front of the cameras.
Teresa in chat is informing us of some old Anglo-Saxon, and it always reminds me that word of the guy who sat at the beach and tried to stop the waves.
Yeah, I think we know the word. I can't imagine any time that word is an affectionate term. It's almost like rappers using the N-word to each other, I would suggest. That word is used as possibly the rudest insult for both women and men. I can't, unless you're in some kind of strange psychodrama relationship, you're not going to use that in any relationship to a lady that you love. It would be a masochistic relationship that had that word in it.
Yeah, it has a certain power. Certain words do, sonically even. The body demands that you say them sometimes, involuntarily. I think it has its origins somehow etymologically in wounds. Don't know, I'm trying to think of other words that use the same kind of arrangement of letters.
Well, I think as soon as it got attached to the lady's female part, then that made it sociologically the most taboo thing. The same areas on a man, I can say them out loud. I can say balls. I can say he's a dick. I can say he's a cock. I can't say the word that would relate to a woman. Oh, I can say somebody's a tit, meaning either the bird or the part of the lady's anatomy, a bosom. But the word for the most intimate part of a woman is always the most taboo.
Unless you're like Miss Slocum in Are You Being Served? And the other one is like in Scotland, when I was a kid, we were really fond of using this word fud, which was apparently comes from a rabbit.
Oh, I think all the ones that are associated with animals and have two meanings are much easier to use. And then I think crossing over from genders, I honestly don't think I even heard the word until I was 35 years old. But just appreciating humor in different places, I really only hear it in maybe from women comedians in the UK who are, I think when you say something often enough, it loses that kind of meaning that we're talking about right now. But it makes it more hilarious because I honestly have never said it or even written it.
The comedian Lenny Bruce did a brilliant sketch about analysing the verb to come, and he took it to a level where it just became very sterile and almost boring, monotonously boring, but incredibly funny at the same time, satirical. Just really pricking the balloon of that self-righteousness in judging people's language.
Yeah. And then in the same company, we've got to say the N word, Richard Pryor. There was a whole skit and a dynamic, and it was where comedy moved over into the power of protest.
That at that period of time, some other comedians misunderstood, and there could be some really vulgar humor, but those ones didn't last. Not that the word is vulgar. I guess now we say people can reclaim the word, but then you yourself wouldn't be using it. But but about humor then. So humor has gotten to this weird awkward kind of humor. Not that it's really related. I'm just seeing the timeline, the evolution of humor from people, I don't know, like Richard Pryor or other people using it effectively, politically, all different ways, and then other people misunderstanding and trying the same thing and falling flat on their face to this genre. It's probably older than I think, but the kind of humor that makes you super uncomfortable, my son loves it and constantly sends it to me, even when we're in a room with everybody's in the room, his wife. It's especially effective if his in-laws are in the room because they're very, I just want to, lovely people, but more into dad jokes and stuff, if you know what I mean. Um, but he'll send me something from someone so awkward. And it's just all I can say is you can't send this to your mother, which is the part that's so funny.
I think there is a term cringeworthy, but I think you're maybe hinting at something maybe a bit more shocking or controversial. But Ricky Gervais was known as a kind of pioneer of what was called the comedy of embarrassment in the UK, where it was like just people in really embarrassing situations, but being incredibly funny. I found that difficult comedy to take at times because I really empathised with these people and felt sorry for them, yet everybody else was laughing. So Little Britain was a huge thing with that, and I hated that show. So just personal, nothing against them. I just hated it because I hated the way they approached comedy. But comedy's really funny now because it's like, there was a thing on the radio today analysing how a lot of them are graduates from major universities like Oxford and Cambridge, which they always were in a sense, like not the goons, they were military showmen. But, you know, the Cambridge Footlights, Beyond the Fringe, and then Monty Python and other things, all coming from public schools. That's satire, I think, the private eye. And satire is a really old thing in Scotland and Celtic culture and Gaelic culture. This idea of destroying someone's reputation through a chant or saying something about them in public. And they were masters of that, the bards. So it's a long tradition there. But bringing it back around to autism, this idea of reclaiming words like mad and weird and crazy, you know, I kind of like referring to some of these words in relation to myself.
A few years ago, I was on a Facebook and I said that it was about mental health. And I said, I'm a complete basket case at the moment. And someone came back quite stroppy and said, how dare you label people who have mental health issues as a basket case? To which I responded, I didn't. I said I was a basket case. I wasn't referring to anyone else.
It's like that time someone said to me, you can't use the phrase brainstorm anymore, Ray, in offices.
You're getting into the territory of Stuart Lee here, aren't we? You know, these days, if you say you're English, the police will come round and arrest you and put you in prison.
Bizarrely, where I live, we have, I was going to say saltires. Yes, it's saltires, you know, the Scottish flag flying from lampposts. And it's right-wingers who are putting them up. It's bizarre. It's like they've totally hijacked a symbolism. But it's actually then made me think about what the core reality of Scottish nationalism really was.
They've hijacked the flag to promote hate.
In some cases, they really do, though, if the flag is not a current flag. I'm just thinking about, I don't want to redirect the conversation in this direction. You're right, Robbie, that does happen. But when some groups take an old version of a flag and permanently change the meaning, that is not good. But I see what you mean. This is a current version of a flag that doesn't represent that. And that is an important thing to make sure doesn't go any further. I just want to circle back to the Anglo-Saxon comment about the word I've never said. I studied Anglo-Saxon in university, Old English. That's so nerdy. I love a dead language.
I think we associate the word with Anglo-Saxon because Anglo-Saxon has another meaning in our language, which usually means an old oath, wherever it comes from. It's just colloquialism. So I don't think we actually mean to truly say it does come from Anglo-Saxon. But I know that my direct line of descendants is from the Anglo-Saxon because of my surname. My surname comes from a tiny little area which is on the border of northern Germany and southern Scandinavian country, Denmark. A very small area, and it's a name that is then adopted throughout what was Anglo-Saxon England.
I actually think the way I spelled it in the chat with using 2 actual letters and then 2 symbols might have made it look a little something. But I do really think the roots of it are there somewhere, like either in very old German or Anglo-Saxon. But anyway, I think it probably is. Do you know what I mean? Oh, and then along that line of conversation too was words that are somehow like, certain vulgar words that actually research has shown if you say them when you're in great pain, it does ease your pain. That's scientifically proven. I mean, if you hammered your thumb, it would be effective, but for long-term pain, I don't think so.
I've used that since I used it naturally. The amount of times I've hit myself with some other tool as I've learnt tools with a slightly cack-handed start, but eventually got some skill at things like using axes and chainsaws. And having read it gradually, realizing I decided to say it even more often. And then I decided to use swear words when I'm not in physical pain, but when I'm in anguish, let's say mental pain, but anguish, just fucked off. And I find that it has a very similar effect on mental pain as much as physical pain. Swearing a lot at something and directing it a figure of hate or fun is very therapeutic, and it removes some of that anxiety and pain.
I keep thinking that if I ever met the Maharishi to learn transcendental meditation and asked him for a mantra, he would give me something like fuck. And so, great, that would empty my mind, or would it? But when you were doing your origin story there, Jules, it reminded me, if I was meaning to ask Robbie, about that discovery in the news this week of ancient man using fire a lot longer back in time than we previously were aware of. And the evidence is very close to where Robbie lives.
I only really see what's on Facebook. I haven't read papers or watched the news for over 5 years.
I'll try and find a link to the news article for you, Robbie.
It's one of the things I've been doing to keep myself well is to keep away from the news because it just winds me up. Most of it's not proper news, it's propaganda and speculation. And it just causes so much distress. And it's one of the reasons I try and avoid gossip-based conversations.
My birth surname is also Anglo-Saxon, and I'm sure I had nothing to do with the origins of fire.
My surname is of Welsh origin.
It's my wife's origins that make us laugh most, because one of the members of the family has done a lot of genealogy, and she's a direct descendant of Robert the Bruce, which is quite a character in Scottish history. Most people can find some kind of link across these various courts and this group of privileged people through the centuries, but their family tree is quite ridiculous in the number of points of contact with royalty.
At least he was real. Supposed to say somebody. I'm not sure if William Wallace was actually real. But Bruce, is that not French?
Well, I don't remember all that she's told me, but there's castles in Germany and there's places in France. There's relatives that were at Agincourt on both sides. And there's a whole Scottish dimension through one grandparent that goes ridiculous.
I remember once in the 80s being in a really good pub in Edinburgh and talked to this old guy. I mean, I was in my early 20s at the time. And he says, look, we're all bloody Vikings anyway, son. I think what he meant by that was like Normans.
Well, the thing about me is that I think I'm quite inbred in the Saxon. So I'm effectively Aryan. Hitler would have loved me.
Well, as you know, I am a genealogist, and so sometimes the most interesting clients who honestly will try through DNA to figure out. They really want to go back to, am I a Saxon? Am I a Viking? Am I this? Am I that? And if their family stayed in one place long enough, but no one's ever really did. It's open for debate, but in genealogy, when you get back there, there are many legendary figures. So because things come down through oral tradition, and because the nature of oral tradition can end up over time conflating characters together for a better story, that's what happens. And people will still book big blocks of my time to just have a conversation about it with them. Oh, and they're not just older people. This happened where I had a client who was, I believe he was like 19 or 20, and then we had time booked that went over periodically 2 years, and it was a university student in the really far north of Germany. And Germany is the place I've been to the most when traveling, but not purposely. As I say, I do have some family lines that go to there, but just since this conversation is leading to my random thoughts, I thought I'd add it.
Germany's a transit point, isn't it? It's kind of, you pass through it. Trans-Europe Express, as Kraftwerk said.
I often think of the Roman road going up on the west side of it, depending on what the map is anyway. And Germany hasn't really been Germany for all that long in history. So
My great-grandfather was a politician in Germany before Nazis seized power. And when he was born, where he was born was actually Prussia.
I was reading recently that the Austro-Hungarian Empire, that was still dying out when the Nazis came to power, was seen as a very liberal and enlightened society. I need to look into that a wee bit more.
The thing about history, you get a one-sided version written by the people who won.
But I think we're all smart enough to look past that. I don't think a lot of people are. And then this goes way back earlier in our conversation where Ray used, or both of you, Robbie and Ray, were onto that idea of herd. I think two things: herd mentality when we were talking about the holiday shopping, and then also when we were somehow flipped over based on that excellent comment when we flipped over to illness, the mad cow switch, and then that's like herd spreading. Oh, and at that time, I wanted to add on the migration of birds, because right now in Canada we have We call them Canadian geese here, who are falling down dead in fields, and the news is telling farmers not to touch them.
Oh, that's sad. I was just thinking there, I quite like it when I'm up in the early hours and I'm in my kitchen and everything's quiet outside and I can hear overhead birds call. It's just fab.
I live right in the heart of a major city, not in a suburb, where there's a hawk who frequents my yard, and so many birds, even a hummingbird. I know they come every year, but I don't see them every year, but I did this year.
You make me think of an old song there, the bright elusive butterfly.
Bringing up all those about the geese reminds me of all those ostriches they killed.
Yeah, I thought of that too, Robbie. That was like a cross-border situation. Like even the United States had opinions and was sending people about it. It's in British Columbia, for those of you who haven't heard. I couldn't make a decision on what I thought about it.
How did humans figure out that cooking food protected them from bacteria and illness? Things like that keep me awake at night.
Just rest assured that it was your ancestors who were on the right side of that, because the ones who didn't figure it out died.
Yeah, that's a shocking thought to have sometimes, that we are the descendants of those who survived.
The awful thing about it, though, is that I have autoimmune disorders because scientifically it's becoming more obvious that it is as a result of having enough ancestors who survived the plague that your body is just chaos. So that means, you know how it works? You have 2 parents, 4 grandparents, 8 great-grandparents. It's like that thing where you fold a piece of paper enough times and it's enormous. So you have so many ancestors, so many, that just enough of them surviving the plague is going to mess you up.
Yeah, and then you pump that through an industrial process in society.
I don't think they did know that cooking meat would make them survive better. I think they just found it easier to eat larger quantities, and it tasted better if it had been cooked and left about than if it had been left about and gone rotten.
Do you think it was accidental, the discovery? I mean, there wasn't one moment, was it? There's never one moment in anything.
I think it overlapped because indigenous people now still eat plenty of raw meat. They eat worms and bugs and insects and all kinds of stuff without cooking it. Sushi. We're an omnivorous, curious animal. We'll just have a go at stuff.
Yeah, both of those things, like you probably would eat as much of it raw as you could, but then to preserve it so that you could save some for the next day, depending on the size of the group you're in with that dead animal, you would somehow know that you could then eat it the next day. But also the accident. I think a lot of recipes, when I think about them, are 100% an accident. Like, has anybody ever had dirty chai? Chai with some espresso in it? That was an accident.
Or if you eat a banana after a curry.
I love a good accident.
Tales of the unexpected, I would say, relating it back to the idea. I think the theme today has been like stories and narratives that you can tell yourself, myths and histories, and to make meaning of things, give them names.
Well, it's 5:44 now, so our drop-in hour is finished, and thank you to all the people who have texted, and also to the people who have put their voices to this, that are going to allow us to put some of those words out into the podcast. If you join us here at the 444, your voice isn't recorded, your text isn't recorded, but the people here have given permission so that it's an example for others. See you again, always reliably, Sunday, 4:44 p.m. Cheers, guys.